After my family went bankrupt and I was forced to become the boy husband for a Zen master scion of the DC elite, I tried to seduce Alexander Stone and make him break his vows. But he was a man of discipline and desire, and he'd rather go hide in his meditation room and chant sutras than give me a second glance. That is, until I tried to call off the wedding and ran off to Europe to kiss foreign strangers. Alexander tracked me down, grabbed me by the collar, and dragged me back. In a dimly lit room, his eyes were red-rimmed as he pulled me into his arms and kissed me passionately. I never agreed to it. We can't separate. Inside the private room at the club. Are you really going to marry Alexander Stone? Dude, we're still young, free, and innocent. My friend Chris shouted. I threw back a shot of liquor. The burn searing my throat did little to ease my frustration. Yeah, well, the minute I was legal, I had to start contributing to the family. How about you? Chris sheepishly let go of the beautiful girl in his arms. I just stared at him. To be honest, when I first found out my family was broke and I had to marry Alexander Stone, the so-called Buddha of DC's inner circle, I was pretty miserable too. Alexander was born frail and was sent to a monastery as a child to practice Buddhism, though he never took the final vows. He wasn't really part of our crowd. Chris said sympathetically, I hear Alexander is a cold fish. Once you're married, as long as you don't do anything crazy, your virtue should be safe. I shot him a look. I like men, but I'm not so desperate that I'd throw myself at a total stranger. Chris sighed. Speaking of which, your dad is rushing you into this marriage. You don't think he's just trying to get you out of the way so he can bring his new wife home, do you? My face darkened. He can try, but we'll see if he dares. After a few rounds, our group was heading out to hit the next spot when a commotion broke out in a dim corner of the bar. The floor was littered with shattered glass from a broken bottle. Then came the sharp voice of some rich asshole. This bottle was worth $15,000. How are you going to pay for that? Chris watched the drama unfold, scoffing, what a classic move. Seriously, who still uses a line like that to pick someone up? Especially when their target was another guy. The rich asshole wouldn't let it go. The bar manager, who was clearly friends with the guy and knew which side his bread was buttered on, kept piling on the pressure. But the poor victim just stood there silently. I couldn't tell if he was too scared or just intimidated into silence. I couldn't just stand by. Is that bottle made of gold or something? Why is it so expensive? Everyone's eyes turned to me. I glanced over and finally realized that the so-called victim was incredibly handsome. A string of prayer beads was wrapped around his pale, slender wrist. He had an otherworldly vibe, with dark, detached eyes like a deep, cold spring. Eyes met for just a second, and I was completely mesmerized. No wonder the rich asshole was pulling such a scummy move. This bar was expensive. The guy must have figured the handsome stranger wasn't a regular and probably didn't have much money, so he deliberately ran a scam. The manager recognized us and smiled obsequiously, handing me a pre-prepared drink menu. It's imported from overseas. I was speechless. I nudged Chris, who was standing next to me. I was broke after all. Then I patted the shoulder of the handsome man, who was a good half a head taller than me, and said reassuringly, "Don't worry." The man looked up at me, his eyes holding an emotion I couldn't decipher. I chose to interpret it as gratitude. Chris shot me a glare, then took the menu and paid the bill. Seeing his plan fall apart, the rich asshole's narrow eyes widened. Then, as if remembering something, he laughed. "You're Chris, right?" Chris was confused. The asshole then pointed at me. "So that means this guy next to you must be the one and only Leo Chin." My face turned grim. He got even more excited. "The news that your old man sold you to the Stone family is all over town. Instead of sitting at home waiting for your wedding day, what are you doing out here looking for a good time? Aren't you afraid Alexander Stone will chop you into pieces? I'd be less than human if I let that slide." I kicked over the table in front of him. What I do for fun has jack shit to do with some goddamn Alexander Stone. Even if I find 10 guys out here, it's none of his business. Maybe it was my imagination, but after I said that, I felt the handsome man's gaze on me become even more subtle. But I was furious and didn't pay it much mind. I exchanged a look with Chris, ready to roll up my sleeves and charge, but a cool hand grabbed my wrist. The handsome man spoke. "Don't start a fight in here." I wouldn't listen. He tightened his grip and said softly, trying to calm me down, "I have a way to handle this." What way could there possibly be? Right now, I felt like a balloon with a hole that I couldn't patch, just watching myself deflate. It was worse than getting beaten up. In the end, I didn't fight. Chun Corp was already on shaky ground and couldn't afford any more trouble. Seeing me lower my hands, the rich asshole shot me a smug, sleazy grin. Outside the bar, I was no longer in the mood to party. I'm heading out. Wait, I turned to look at the handsome man, my eyes asking what he wanted. He said, "Can I get your number?" My first thought was that he wanted to pay back the 15 grand, so I waved my hand. Don't worry about the money. It's just one less bottle for Chris here to pop. But for a regular person, that could be a lot of money earned over a long time. I didn't say that last part out loud, afraid of hurting the man's pride. I tilted my head. Right, Chris? Chris gritted his teeth beside me, forced to nod. But we still exchanged numbers. I said, "Was that your first time at that bar? Don't go back. That manager has a sharp eye for targets. If you run into him again, you'll be in for it." The handsome man thought for a moment and agreed. Even though he looked cold and distant, he was surprisingly obedient. I slid my finger across my phone screen. "What's your name? I'll add you as a contact." Just then, a black Kian pulled up to the bar entrance. In the dim light of the night, the man's eyes were dark and deep. Alexander Stone. I froze. So did Chris. In the car, after a long time processing, I finally mumbled, "That was Alexander fucking Stone?" Even the usually hyper Chris was uncharacteristically quiet. Yep. I racked my brain. I didn't say anything bad about him, did I? Chris replied, "If goddamn doesn't count as an insult." I wanted to cry. I hated myself for meddling at the bar, but I also couldn't help but resent Alexander. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, pretending to be a kitten to prey on my sympathy. I gritted my teeth in frustration, imagining how much he must be laughing on the inside. When I got home, I found a message from Alexander. I didn't mean to hide that I was Alexander Stone. It just wasn't a convenient place to say so. "I'm sorry." The Stone family was powerful, but as the saying goes, tall trees attract the wind. Besides, Alexander had a reputation for being a teetotaler. If he was photographed being harassed at a bar, the headline of tomorrow's DC gossip columns wouldn't be about my dad, but about him. Alexander had sent the message around 10 p.m., meaning he'd texted me as soon as we parted ways. I just hadn't seen it because I was too busy having a meltdown. I was silent for a couple of seconds before replying, "K. Alexander, are you mad?" I replied with false sincerity. "No. What were you doing at a bar by yourself?" Everyone in our circle knew Alexander was famously straight-laced. Alexander seemed to find it hard to explain. "Someone invited me, but they had to cancel at the last minute." Now I got it. "So that was your first time at a bar?" Alexander. Yeah, my mood instantly improved. I smirked, my chest vibrating with suppressed laughter. No wonder he was seen as such easy prey. After that chance encounter, I figured Alexander and I wouldn't cross paths again until we were signing the marriage license. But it wasn't long before my dad packed me off to the Stone family residence to get to know each other before the wedding. I frowned. "Why?" My dad snorted. "I've already spoken with the Stones. They also think it's necessary to build a connection before the wedding. You need to do everything you can to please Alexander, or Chun Corp is truly finished." I sighed, and suddenly the snacks in my hand didn't taste so good anymore. I let out a derisive laugh. "Are you really trying to save the company? Or are you just trying to make room for your mistress?" My father's face stiffened, flushed with the embarrassment of being called out. "This company was your mother's life's work, too. If you don't want to see it go bankrupt, you'll go and you'll be good about it." The implication was clear. I had no choice. I gave a cold laugh and turned to go upstairs. "If it weren't for Mom, do you think I would let you throw me away like an object?" My dad was a college student from a poor town. His story with my mom was a classic cliché. The rich heiress falling for the poor boy. My grandfather looked down on my dad's background and disapproved of the marriage, but my mom married him anyway. In the early days, my dad had no capital to start his business, so my mom provided the funds and worked tirelessly to help him run the company. Just as the company started to do well, they began to clash. My dad felt that my mom's constant involvement in company affairs was a sign of disrespect. He hated how her wealthy background bruised his ego, yet he shamelessly enjoyed the advantages it brought. After my mom passed away, he met Bianca, a woman who showered him with gentle affection, and he quickly fell into her tender trap. Once, when he was drunk, he even said, "A woman should be like your Aunt Bianca. Being too strong is no good. Women are meant to be accessories to men." A chill went down my spine, and our relationship grew more distant. The night wind was cold and biting. That same evening, I went to Alexander's secluded villa outside the city. I rang the doorbell. The moment I saw him, the sadness in my heart eased a little. Alexander looked up, his eyes landing on my slightly flushed face. "Have you been drinking?" Nodded. Liquid courage. I had deliberately gotten myself drunk before coming. Alexander poured me a glass of warm water. The way his well-defined fingers held the cup made my mouth go dry. Alexander said, "Drinking is bad for you. You should drink less in the future." Maybe it was the alcohol, or maybe it was the humiliation of being forced here by my dad. But I shot back defiantly, "We're not even married yet and you're already trying to control me?" Alexander was taken aback for a moment. "Do as you please." I was speechless. Felt like punching a cotton ball. Alexander had impeccable manners. He stood with a straight back, the buttons of his black shirt done up to the very top. His cold, handsome face, paired with that disciplined physique, sent my mind racing, imagining what lay beneath that shirt. I was so lost in thought I didn't even watch where I was going. If Alexander hadn't caught me, I would have face-planted on the floor. The hand on my waist lingered for a moment before quickly pulling away. I raised an eyebrow. "So shy?" Seeing his slightly red earlobes, I couldn't resist teasing him. I leaned in close to Alexander and blew a warm breath against his ear. "We're about to get married. Don't you want to check out the goods tonight, Mr. Stone? See if the alcohol has done any damage?" Alexander clearly didn't expect me to be so forward. His ears turned beet red, and even his usually calm eyes rippled with emotion. "Leo, this is a contract marriage. I won't break my vows." During this time, I was speechless again. It seemed the flirting techniques I learned from Chris were useless on Alexander. My room was right next to Alexander's. Late at night, I was playing a game online with Chris. When he zoned out and his character's mana bar hit 0 for the 10th time, I clicked my tongue. "If you've got something to say, just spit it out." Chris said, "You remember that scumbag from the bar?" I grunted in acknowledgement. "His name is Chad. His family owns a chain of department stores, and he acts like he owns the world just because he has a little money. And this time he even tried to mess with us. But I heard their stores are on the verge of bankruptcy and have already been acquired." He chuckled smugly, as if he were the one who had bought out the family's business. "Do you know who acquired them?" I clicked the mouse, pulling off a beautiful counterkill, and said, "Alexander Stone." Chris was disappointed. "No fun. How'd you guess?" Remembering the cool hand that had stopped me at the bar, I coughed uncomfortably.
"I'm psychic."
After a few more rounds, just as Chris was about to log off, I stopped him and asked hesitantly, "You've been around the block, so you must have a lot of experience in that department, right?" "Alexander is sleeping in the room right next to mine." Chris was silent for half a second, then yelled, "Holy crap, you and Alexander hit it off? You're not trying to seduce him just to stop your dad from getting remarried, are you?" I frowned. "Shut up. I just don't want things to be so awkward between us." Alexander was definitely my type, otherwise, I wouldn't have helped him at the bar. Besides, the marriage contract was for 3 years. If we didn't get along, was I supposed to spend the next 3 years living with an ice cube? Chris scoffed. And who was it that swore just a few days ago they wouldn't throw themselves at a guy they were in a contract marriage with? Cut the crap. Do you have a plan or not? Chris thought for a moment, looking troubled. "I'm into women. My moves might not work on a guy. Tell you what, I'll go ask an expert." With that, he quickly logged off. By the time I got out of the shower, I had a new message from Chris. "Found you the gay man's version of The Art of War." He then sent me a link to a novel titled The Twink Who Seduced the CEO, with a cover featuring 2 men intertwined. I was speechless. Alexander was the most boring person on the planet. He was either at the office or in his meditation room. He had virtually no social life. That probably meant he'd never really been drunk before. According to my all-night study of this new art of war, alcohol was a powerful tool. In the book, the main couple finally hit a home run thanks to booze. I wasn't asking for much, just a little taste. So, I had Chris meet me at a bar, and when I was so drunk my body felt like a noodle, I handed him my phone. Make the call. Resigned? Chris dialed the number. A few minutes later, he told me Alexander's on his way. My head was spinning, but I managed to nod. Soon I heard movement nearby. Chris stood up, his voice dripping with sycophantic apology. So sorry to bother you, Mr. Stone. I wouldn't have called if Leo's dad wasn't so useless. I had no one else to call to come get him. Alexander didn't say anything. Footsteps approached. The AC in the room was a bit chilly, and I curled up on the sofa. Suddenly, a wave of warmth washed over me as a jacket was draped over my shoulders. Alexander touched my forehead. Leo? He called my name a few more times, trying to wake me up. I gritted my teeth in frustration. Stop calling my name. Just pick me up like they do in the novels, damn it. Fortunately, Chris had some sense. Leo's completely wasted. Should I get a server to help carry him out? Alexander was silent for a moment. No need. Then he slipped his arms under my legs and back, condescending to half carry, half drag me out of the room. I was speechless. Why did this feel like I was being dragged off to my execution? Back at the house, Alexander brought me to my room. Just as he was about to leave, I grabbed his hand. Looking up at him with eyes moist from the alcohol, I whined, I want to take a shower. Alexander clearly didn't expect me to be so difficult. I'll run the hot water for you. Once the bath was ready, I stood pitifully at the bathroom door.
Alexander, I'm dizzy.
Can you help me with my pants? Alexander froze. Maybe it was my imagination, but his face seemed to flush red when I said that. I pretended not to care. We're both guys. What are you afraid of? Finally, Alexander stepped into the bathroom. He hesitated for a moment before his hands went to my waist. As he lifted the hem of my shirt, his fingertips accidentally brushed against my skin, sending a jolt through my entire body. Alexander had probably never helped anyone undress before. His movements were clumsy and uncertain. I giggled and tapped his thin lips with my finger. You're so shy. Almost instantly, Alexander jumped back like a startled rabbit. Don't touch me. I frowned. But we're getting married, aren't we? Alexander's fair face was practically glowing. I decided not to tease him anymore. Okay, I won't touch you. I'll wait until after we sign the papers. I watched Alexander's retreating back, trying hard to hide his flustered state, and couldn't help but smile. After that night, Alexander ignored me for days. When we finally had a meal together, he sat directly across from me. Annoyed, I scrolled through my phone and watched a live stream. I landed on an entertainment interview. A beautiful woman in her 30s was sitting in the studio. The reporter asked, Ms. Bianca, what does the film The Cocoon mean to you? The woman smiled. It means rebirth. It's where I met the love of my life. The studio audience erupted in cheers. I rolled my eyes. Of course, it was a rebirth. Before Chen Corp went bankrupt, my dad had invested over $100 million into that film for her. It single-handedly turned her from a universally mocked nobody into an award-winning actress. The reporter then asked, we hear that Mr. Chun has a son. What is your relationship with him like? The woman replied, Leo can be a bit willful, but I try my best to be patient with him. Smack. I slammed my phone face down on the table. Leo? I looked up and met Alexander's gaze. It wasn't surprising that Alexander knew the whole story. My dad, obsessed with his public image, was constantly in the headlines with Bianca. I asked, do you think she's beautiful? Alexander frowned. His lips pressed into a thin line. Right, I forgot he was the celibate Buddha of DC. I took the opportunity to slide closer to him. She's the woman my dad is going to marry. She bullies me all the time. Knowing my dad, he'll probably marry her before we even sign our papers. I'll probably get kicked out of the house. While that was an exaggeration, it was true that Bianca was always finding ways to target me. She wouldn't just subtly mock me in front of the media as a lazy spendthrift. She would also play the victim and claim I was bullying her. It got to the point where someone who wasn't even in the entertainment industry, was trending for all the wrong reasons several times. Alexander looked down at me, his eyes deep. Do you want my help? My eyes widened. The fate of Chad's family business flashed through my mind, and I quickly shook my head. I can handle her. There was no need to actually bankrupt Chun Corp. I then took the chance to wrap my arms around his lean waist. Alexander coughed uncomfortably. Let go. I I shook my head. First, promise you won't abandon me. Alexander stopped moving. Confused, I looked up and saw his face had darkened. I was startled and immediately let go. The truth is, I'm a coward. The only reason I had been so bold these past few days was because Alexander had let me. But the look on his face right now was not good. I started picking at my food. I was just kidding. But then I heard him say softly, okay. Alexander had a habit of going to a monastery for a couple of days every so often to meditate. I wanted to go with him. Alexander looked at me, seeming to weigh whether someone as noisy as me could handle the quiet of a monastery. I held up 3 fingers in a vow. I promise I'll be good. Alexander's expression softened. Okay. Somehow he had agreed. But when we got there, I found out he had his own private meditation chamber, while I was staying in the guest quarters for visitors. We wouldn't even see each other. That evening, as I poured a bucket of water into a large vat, I was so angry my hair felt like it was standing on end. Alexander was playing games with me. He hadn't told me that to stay at this monastery you had to work for your lodging. I had already carried 6 buckets of water, and next, I had to sweep the courtyard. I pouted, feeling wronged, sweat nearly dripping into my eyes. Chasing a guy all the way to a monastery, I had to be the first. But I never expected to run into my dad, Bianca, and her son, Brandon, who were there to offer incense. Bianca was dressed elegantly, holding my dad's arm. They looked like a picture-perfect family. I stood on the steps, watching them. I remembered Bianca once bragging to me that they would bring Brandon to the temple to pray for his peace and success. My dad didn't see me, but Bianca deliberately pulled him in my direction. I had just finished my chores and was sweaty and disheveled. Brandon was the spitting image of his mother. He pinched his nose and said, "Leo, are you so poor you have to work here for pocket money?" My eyes nearly rolled out of my head. "Dude, that's not how you play the clueless innocent." My dad snorted, always doing useless things, embarrassing the family. I put down the broom. "You're all dressed up in a suit now, but have you forgotten when you used to shovel manure and plant vegetables to get through school? Why are you looking down on it now?" My dad's face turned ashen, which made me feel a lot better. He had told me that story when I was in elementary school, after I came home crying because some older kids had bullied me. He had used it to lecture me. "Why do they only push you? You're so whiny and spoiled." More times with the same result, I stopped telling him anything. Brandon pretended to mediate. "Leo, don't say that. Dad really misses you." Ha, he's calling him dad already? Anyone who didn't know better would think they were father and son. Just as my frustration was peaking, a voice broke the tension. It was Alexander's assistant. "Mr. Chun, Mr. Stone would like you to join him." I followed the assistant's gesture and saw Alexander sitting in a pavilion. When he saw me looking, his gaze softened. I immediately dropped the broom and started to walk over. My dad tried to grab me, scolding me without a shred of shame in front of everyone. "No manners at all. Your elders are still here, and you're running off." The assistant stepped in front of me, blocking my dad. "Mr. Stone said that Chun Corp will now be in charge of the West Side Development Project." Only then did my dad release me, satisfied. As I turned to leave, I saw Brandon staring at Alexander, lost in thought. On the car ride back, I was sullen. The more I thought about it, the more I was sure there was something off about the way Brandon looked at Alexander. I decided I had to step up my game. I stared at Alexander so intensely it felt like I was about to burn a hole through him. He chuckled softly. "What's wrong?" I whined. "I spent 2 days carrying water and chopping wood. My back is killing me." Alexander glanced at my waist. "Should we go to the hospital?" I was so mad I could have spit blood. I leaned in closer. "I'm very picky about beds. The one in my room is too hard. My back will only get worse tonight." Alexander fiddled with his prayer beads. "I'll have someone change it for you." I clenched my fists. "Your bed looks really soft. I want to sleep there." Alexander's gaze deepened, but he didn't stop fiddling with the beads. "Fine. We can switch rooms." The air went silent. I gritted my teeth and said in a hoarse voice, "Don't you get it? What I mean is, I want to sleep with MMPH. Alexander clamped a hand over my mouth. His dark eyes filled with an intensity one couldn't read. "Don't say it." A smirk formed on my lips. Alexander's fingers trembled as a warm, wet sensation spread across his palm. There was a hint of anger in his eyes, but his impeccable upbringing prevented him from scolding me. I raised an eyebrow. I bite. That night, I knocked on Alexander's door, pillow in hand. He was silent for a moment, then let his hand fall from the doorknob, silently allowing me into his room. Alexander slept in a perfectly straight line, unlike me who often ended up sideways. I turned my head to admire his handsome profile and whispered, "Alexander?" No response. A grin spread across my face, and I slipped my hand under the covers. But just as I was about an inch from my target, my wrist was caught. Alexander frowned at me, his voice slightly hoarse. "It seems a trip to the monastery didn't teach you to behave." I pouted. He just didn't understand the agony of having a gorgeous man lying next to you, completely off limits. I asked, "So when can I misbehave?" Alexander didn't answer. Fine. The next day, to avoid my questions, Alexander went to the office extra early. I told Chris about my troubles. Chris gave me a sly grin. My ex-girlfriend used to pull the whole running away from home routine whenever she wanted to buy a new bag, because she knew I'd agree to anything to get her back. "Why don't you try running away? Sometimes it's a fun little game for couples." I thought about it for a moment and decided it made a lot of sense. Following the playbook from my gay romance novel, I wrote a breakup letter and fled the country that night. Every day, I posted photos of myself eating, drinking, and enjoying the sights, all visible only to Alexander. I was sure he'd take the bait. 2 days later, Alexander caught me. I was at a bar overseas when a handsome European guy came over to ask for my number. As I smiled and took out my phone, a hand grabbed my wrist and pulled me to my feet. Alexander's handsome face was uncharacteristically dark. "What do you think you're doing?" I shook his hand off. "Having some fun. If you won't let me touch you and you won't kiss me, why can't I find someone who will?" Alexander clearly hadn't expected this to be the reason I ran away. His face grew even darker. The handsome foreigner stood up. "Sorry," but one look from Alexander sent him scurrying away without another word. After a moment of silence, he dragged me out of the bar and shoved me into a car. I raised an eyebrow. "If you don't agree, I'm just going to run off again." Alexander had never looked so helpless, not even when dealing with the most difficult business matters. He rubbed his temples in frustration. "What do you want?" The fish was on the hook. I smiled. "Mr. Stone, you're so proper. How about we play for keeps tonight?" Alexander looked at me, confused, a dangerous storm brewing in his dark eyes. I narrowed my eyes, leaned in closer, and said with a wicked grin, "Kiss me." Alexander frowned. The seconds ticked by. I clicked my tongue and said brazenly, "Cow," before I could finish. A pair of hands gripped my waist, and a wave of warmth washed over me. All I could smell was his faint, cool scent. I didn't expect to wake up the next day with something hard pressing against my finger. I stared at the silver ring on my hand, my eyes wide and all sleepiness gone. Did I get drunk and steal someone's ring? Alexander walked out of the bathroom with a towel around his waist. "What's wrong?" He handed me a glass of warm water and said calmly, "I was afraid you'd run away again." I looked at the red marriage license on the nightstand. I was speechless. "Do you regret it?" Alexander frowned. "But you were willing yesterday." I was confused. I did have a vague memory of threatening Alexander in the car to marry me immediately. But how can a drunk person's words be taken seriously? There was even a wedding ring. I looked at the expensive-looking silver ring on my finger. Where did this come from? You didn't just buy it on a whim, did you? Alexander coughed lightly. "I bought it a few months ago." I was floored. Alexander dragged me back home. On the plane, I stared at the marriage certificate in my hands, still feeling like it wasn't real. Alexander sat perfectly straight in his expensive suit. I reached over, pulled his shoulder toward me, and shamelessly rested my head on it. Alexander's back stiffened, but he didn't push me away. I grumbled, "Sitting so straight all the time looks uncomfortable." Alexander's brow furrowed. I thought I had hurt his pride and was about to apologize when he said, "Okay, I'll work on it." Now it was my turn to be silent. That was a hard thing to hear from Alexander. But on second thought, the image of him slouching like me would probably be pretty weird. "Actually, just stay like that," I said. Alexander let out a barely perceptible sigh of relief. I looked at him, puzzled. When we got home, I started searching everywhere for the secret weapon that had led to my success. I muttered to myself, where did it go? I had been in a hurry when I left and remembered leaving it in my room. Alexander had just gotten back from the office. Seeing the messy room, he asked, what are you looking for? I couldn't possibly tell him. Alexander held up a book with a cover that would make anyone blush. This? I yelped and tried to snatch it, but he held it out of reach. You should read less of this stuff. Why not? I retorted. That was my seduction Bible. I couldn't have won him over without it. Alexander patted my head. Just ask me directly next time. You don't need to guess my feelings from a book. That weekend, Alexander and I attended a banquet. Countless people came up to toast him, and my legs were starting to ache. Alexander said considerately, do you want to go rest? I shook my head. Alexander said, don't push yourself if you're tired. I nodded. I didn't expect to run into Bianca there. This was a very exclusive event, filled with top business leaders, a level of networking the entertainment world couldn't touch. My father had asked me to get Alexander to give Bianca an invitation, but I refused. I didn't expect her to get in anyway. My dad must have sacrificed all his pride to please his darling wife. Bianca glided over in an exquisite haute couture gown. She smiled triumphantly with Brandon, dressed like a peacock, trailing behind her. It seemed Bianca was desperate to get Brandon into this circle, probably to launch his entertainment career. Brandon stepped forward and smiled sweetly. Alexander, I frowned. This was only their second meeting, and he was already being so familiar? Brandon was naturally fair-skinned, with striking features that were very popular at the moment. Alexander said coldly, we're not that close. It's better if you use my full name. Brandon's eyes reddened with embarrassment. He looked so lost, as if he'd suffered a great injustice. Although paparazzi were banned from the event, you couldn't stop people from loving gossip. Everyone started casting glances in our direction. Bianca, who had been riding high in the entertainment world thanks to my dad's support, couldn't stand the loss of face. Her expression turned ugly. You've been married for so long and you haven't brought Jules home to visit? Have you forgotten you even have a family? Jules? This is why Bianca was an idiot, only good enough to fool my dad. Even my dad probably wouldn't dare call Alexander that. Bianca's words grew sharper. You've only been married for a short while, and you've already forgotten your own name? I scoffed. You've been with my dad for quite a while now, haven't you? Enjoying all of Chun Corp's resources, you can't possibly be ignorant of who built this company in the first place, can you? Bianca gritted her teeth in anger. My own face was dark as I remembered how my dad had gotten together with this woman not long after my mom died. As my thoughts grew heavy, a hand with well-defined knuckles squeezed my wrist, a gentle gesture of comfort. Then Alexander shot Bianca a cold glance. From now on, if you ever say anything to hurt Leo again, remember this. The Chun family might have built you up, but I can certainly tear you down. And the Stone family will withdraw all its support for Chun Corporation. Bianca was speechless. She looked like she wanted to say something back, but one look at Alexander and she lost her nerve. She scurried away with Brandon in tow. In the lounge, I took a sip of water to cool down, then remembered to ask Alexander, besides the investment you agreed to in the contract, what else did you give Chun Corp? I couldn't figure out how Chun Corp, which had been going downhill since my mom's death, could have recovered so quickly without the Stone family's help. Alexander patted my head. Nothing much. I insisted. Tell me. Just the West Side Development Project and the suburban resort in DC. I almost choked on my water. Alexander quickly patted my back to help me catch my breath. Chun Corp was your mother's life's work. With these projects keeping it afloat, you can have some peace of mind. My eyes turned red with emotion. I sniffled. But doesn't that just let Bianca reap all the benefits? No wonder she could afford that ridiculously expensive dress. Seeing my jealousy, Alexander comforted me. It's fine. Those projects are nothing to the Stone family. If you want them, I can give them all to you. I was speechless. Alexander looked down at me, confused, only to be tackled onto the sofa with a loud yelp from me. Thank you, honey. But I never expected Alexander and Brandon to start trending online together. It started with Brandon posting a selfie from the banquet. The photo not only featured him but also a dashing Alexander in the background, caught between conversations. In the photo, Alexander's light-colored eyes were looking toward the camera, a hint of a smile in them. Their good looks attracted a lot of attention. Then, someone dug up that Brandon was Bianca's son and Alexander was the heir to the Stone family. The CEO versus cute showbiz newcomer narrative hooked a lot of fans. They even started trending. Many people began to ship them. They're so perfect together, I'm dying. Can you two please get married for my sake? But some people noticed something was off. But isn't Alexander Stone already engaged? The person continued, I think it's to Bianca's stepson. You mean that spoiled rich kid who's a total waste of space? WTF. Stop breaking up my ship. Leo Chun can go to hell. I heard Leo Chun can't stand Bianca and her son. OMG, Bianca is so good to her stepson, always defending him in public, and he turns out to be an ungrateful brat? Most of those rich kids are arrogant and bossy. He probably bullies them behind the scenes. My heart goes out to them. So disgusting. Is this what a spoiled, vicious rich kid is like?
So groß.
That afternoon, Brandon accidentally liked a post that said he and Alexander were a perfect match and that I should just get out of the way. Although he quickly unliked it and claimed it was an accident, his involvement only fanned the flames. My personal account, which I used to post about my daily life, was dug up, and I was flooded with hateful private messages. I turned off my phone. Out of sight, out of mind. Even Chris, who usually only cared about partying, sent me a message to check in. I told him it was fine since I wasn't in the entertainment industry. Anyway, but when I checked again, the trending topic was gone. The top post had over 1 million likes. I clicked on it. Alexander Stone? It was his verified account. In his post, he clarified his relationship with me and stated that he didn't know Brandon and had no idea how he had secretly taken that photo. Major gossip accounts also jumped in, releasing another photo. Although it also included Brandon and Alexander, it was clear that the main subject of the photo was me sitting and eating. From this angle, Alexander was clearly looking at me, with no connection to Brandon whatsoever. Huh? I thought this was some romantic story, but it turns out it's about a thief trying to steal someone else's husband, and those idiots were shipping them so hard. But Mr. Stone himself posted that he doesn't even know him. Does anyone else know that Bianca basically slid right into Leo Chen's mom's spot?
No wonder.
Like mother, like son. Pair of thieves. The comments on social media did a complete 180. I scrolled through them, one by one, feeling like a small boat that had weathered a storm and finally reached the shore. That night, when Alexander came home as dusk fell, I threw myself into his arms and let out a soft sigh. Thank you. Alexander's ears turned beet red. I raised an eyebrow and seized the opportunity to plant a few more kisses on his face. His skin was like jelly. Wherever I kissed, it turned red. Just as I was having the time of my life, Alexander grabbed my wrist. Stop messing around. I teased, are you getting shy, honey? Alexander frowned. The corners of his long, narrow eyes tinged with red. I suddenly felt like I'd hit the jackpot. Where else could I find such a pure-hearted boyfriend? I lay on the bed, grinning mischievously. Don't all those novels say the male lead buys up the media to defend the female lead? Are you a novel protagonist now? Alexander flicked my forehead. You read too many novels. I muttered under my breath. If I didn't, how would I have ever gotten my hands on you? Riding the wave of controversy, Brandon officially entered the entertainment industry. Although his reputation took a hit from the photo incident, bad publicity is still publicity. With strong support from Chun Corp, he landed roles in a few web series. One day, my dad called me home under the pretense of having a talk. His face was dark. You need to release a statement immediately. Say the whole photo thing was a misunderstanding and that you and your brother have a great relationship. I snorted. What damn brother? He's an idiot. Didn't you see he practically had his eyes glued to Alexander? You're the only one who treats a stepson like his own flesh and blood and uses his actual son as a bargaining chip for a marriage alliance. The more I spoke, the angrier I got. If it wasn't for Alexander, I'd be the one getting piled on by the entire internet right now. I left the rest unsaid, but it was enough to embarrass him. My dad didn't offer any explanation, which meant they knew about Brandon's intentions and just didn't care. The favored one is always fearless. That was Brandon. I asked, he's not your secret love child, is he? My dad's face turned black with rage. He slapped me across the face. Get out. If you don't release that statement, don't ever come back. I let out a shaky breath. I'd be delighted. I turned and walked out, my cheek stinging. But at least I was finally free. When I got home, Alexander was already there. The warm light made me want to cry for a moment, but I held it back. Alexander's gentle expression turned grim when he saw the red mark on my cheek. He rushed over to me, his fingers hovering, wanting to touch but not daring to. The sight of it eased most of the turmoil in my heart. Alexander asked, "Who hurt you?" With just those 3 words, my eyes welled up. I thought I was fine, but seeing Alexander's undisguised concern made a wound that had been festering for years finally begin to heal and sprout new life. I threw myself into his arms. The force of the impact made him stumble back a few steps before he caught his balance. I shamelessly sat on Alexander's lap, tilting my face up obediently as he applied an ice pack to my cheek. Alexander's dark eyes were filled with pain. His movements were gentle, but his gaze held a simmering storm. "I'm sorry." I had been enjoying the cool sensation and was completely thrown by the sudden apology. I was confused. Alexander looked at me seriously. "I shouldn't have let you go back alone." Sensing that Alexander was taking this too hard, I wrapped my arms around his neck and smiled placatingly. "It's not your fault. Even my own father won't stand up for me, so of course I'm the one who loses out." The hand on my waist tightened, and he said with gravity, "It doesn't matter. I'm on your side." He was so close that his warm breath fell on my neck, branding me with the most solemn vow in the world. Alexander Stone will always be on Leo Chen's side. My eyes turned red, and I nodded hard. Yeah. After that, I had very little contact with my dad. Until one day, when Alexander and I were out for dinner, I saw Bianca entering a hotel with another man. At first, I thought it might be some kind of role play with my dad, but the man's build was completely different. I knew something was wrong. Bianca gave him a shy kiss, and I quickly pressed the camera button on my phone. Couldn't believe it. After some digging, I found out the older man was a famous director who was currently casting for an upcoming film. A sarcastic smile formed on my lips. This was the gentle, sweet little woman my dad was always talking about. I gave the photos to a media outlet. Although Bianca's years of slandering me to my dad weren't the main reason for our estrangement, Chun Corp was also my mother's legacy. I couldn't let someone with such poor character remain. News of Bianca's affair spread like wildfire, and when paparazzi later captured more photos, it was confirmed. Her public image completely collapsed. I heard my dad was furious and divorced her. With her reputation in shambles, the famous director also dropped her, and the movie role went to someone else. Without his mother and Chun Corp's backing, Brandon didn't get very far. After a brief period of being infamous, he quickly disappeared from the ever-changing entertainment world. After the 3-year contract ended, my father, seeing that Alexander and I hadn't divorced, tried to get in touch with me again. But I never responded. Later, Alexander and I had a grand wedding and then flew halfway around the world for our honeymoon. All the unhappy memories were left far behind.